Today's story is about a man who spent 26 years designing systems that don't fail. His whole career was built around predicting disasters before they happened, building in backups, accounting for every possible failure point before anything went wrong. His wife and daughter thought they could run a month-long silence experiment on him, complete with a timeline, a predicted breakdown date, and a plan for what they'd do when he finally cracked. He found out by accident, and instead of exploding, he treated his own exit the same way he'd treat a failing aircraft system. 3 years later, he walked back into his daughter's wedding as a complete surprise. And the look on his ex-wife's face when those doors opened, that's the whole reason I had to bring this one to you today. My wife and daughter secretly timed how long it'd take to break me. I found their group chat, left at 4 a.m. without a word, and showed up at the wedding. 3 years later, with a son nobody knew existed. I'm 52. Spent 26 years as an aviation safety engineer, designing fail-safe systems, building backup protocols, making absolutely sure commercial aircraft don't fall out of the sky. The whole job is one long exercise in assuming the worst-case scenario and planning for it before it ever happens. You build in redundancies. You map every possible failure point. You never trust that everything's fine just because nothing's broken yet. I was good at it. Really good. My last contract before everything came apart was a 6-figure deal. 3 weeks overseas consulting with a major airline on updated safety procedures. I genuinely thought I was doing everything right. My marriage was 23 years old. My wife Linda and I had a daughter, Natalie, who was 24 when all of this started, freshly engaged in full wedding planning mode. On the surface, things looked fine. Below the surface, the floor had been quietly rotting for about 2 years. It started small enough that I talked myself out of noticing it. Linda stopped asking about my day, stopped laughing at the dumb stuff I said at dinner, stopped reaching for my hand when we settled in to watch something on TV. I told myself it was stress. Wedding planning is a lot. Her job was demanding. Marriages get tired after 2 decades. I convinced myself that being a solid provider was the same thing as being a present husband. I was deeply wrong about that. I know it now. But back then, I just kept working longer hours and bringing home bigger paychecks, like financial stability would somehow patch whatever I couldn't name yet. Natalie pulled away around the same time. We used to talk about real stuff when she was younger. Career decisions, big life questions, the kind of conversation where she'd actually come to me for input and mean it. Somewhere along the way, her mom's opinion became the only one that counted. I'd try to weigh in on a wedding venue or offer a thought on catering, and she'd smile, say, "Yeah, Dad, thanks." In that tone, that means the exact opposite, and turn back to Linda. I told myself she was just growing up, finding her own voice, becoming her own person. I wasn't ready to admit I was being systematically phased out. The thing that started to get under my skin was the conversations that stopped the second I walked into a room. I'd come home from work, catch the tail end of something, and they'd both go quiet, do that small eye exchange thing, and wait for me to leave before picking back up. Happened enough times that I eventually stopped trying to join in. I just moved through my own house like furniture. Then came the Germany trip. 3 weeks overseas on a major consulting contract, the kind that was going to meaningfully pad the retirement fund. I came home excited, gifts in hand, an embarrassing grin on my face, ready to tell them what this contract meant for our future. Linda looked up from her phone, said, "Welcome back," and went straight back to scrolling. Natalie was at the kitchen table surrounded by wedding magazines. Didn't even glance up. I stood there in the entryway with a suitcase and duty-free chocolate, feeling like I'd walked into somebody else's house by mistake. That's when the real silence started. Not the tired drift of a long marriage. Something deliberate. Something with structure to it. I'd ask Linda a direct question at dinner, and she'd answer Natalie instead, like my words had simply dissolved midair. I'd bring up something about the wedding, and they'd keep talking. No acknowledgement at all. I'd walk into the kitchen, and whatever conversation was happening would just cut off completely. Dead silence. Like a stranger had wandered in off the street. Vendor meetings got scheduled without telling me. Every decision, venue, flowers, catering, the whole thing, made without a word in my direction. When I tried to get involved, Natalie would sigh and say, "Dad, we've got it handled." Then turn back to her mom. Except every invoice still had my name on it. I was the ATM, just not allowed in the actual bank. I noticed they had a group chat I wasn't part of. Natalie's phone would buzz, she'd laugh, show something to Linda, and they'd both crack up while I sat right there. I asked once what was so funny. Just wedding stuff, she said, and looked away a half second too fast. I filed that away. I'm not someone who spirals easily. I'm an engineer. I notice patterns. And this one was getting loud. About 3 weeks into the silent treatment, I needed to check email. My laptop was updating, so I borrowed Natalie's. She'd left a social media tab open. I wasn't looking for anything. I was literally about to close the tab. But the group chat name caught my eye before I could. Wedding Planning Central. Linda, Natalie, Linda's mom, 6 bridesmaids, roughly a dozen other people. Everyone except me. I scrolled back. Weeks of messages. Some of it was actual wedding planning. Most of it was something else. Jokes about how I was always trying to insert myself into conversations. Stuff about how I was too sensitive. How I'd probably wouldn't even notice if they stopped talking to me completely. I kept scrolling. Then I found Linda's message. The one that reframed everything. Give him another week. He'll crack. Won't last a month. Then we can deal with it however we want. I read it 3 times. Then I put the laptop back exactly where I'd found it. This wasn't a marriage that had drifted apart. This was a test. A deliberate, calculated experiment to see how long I'd hold out before I gave them a scene they could use. They were waiting for me to explode, to yell, break something, say the wrong thing, so they could tell everyone I was unstable, difficult, impossible to live with. Then they'd deal with it however they want. Something went quiet in me after that. Not sad quiet, cold quiet. Like a system that had been running hot for months finally found its stable operating temperature. The part of me that had spent years trying to fix things, win back what I'd lost, understand what I'd done wrong, that shut off completely. What replaced it I recognized from work. Problem-solving mode. Facts, logistics, timeline. No emotion in the mix. They had me on a countdown. 9 days until their predicted breakdown point. I wasn't going to give them that moment. And I wasn't leaving messy or impulsive either. I was going to disappear so cleanly that they wouldn't know what happened until I was already somewhere else entirely. Okay, hold on. For the listeners, this is me jumping in, not OP. I need a second to sit with what just happened here. His wife and daughter didn't just drift away from him. They built a project timeline around his emotional collapse, an actual deadline. Give him another week, he'll crack. That's not a marriage falling apart. That's a Truman Show pitch meeting where everyone got the memo except the main character. The man came home from 3 weeks overseas with gifts and duty-free chocolate, and they were mid-experiment while he unpacked his suitcase. And now he's got 9 days, the full problem-solving toolkit of a career fail-safe engineer, and absolutely nothing left to lose. I'd love to hear which part she thought was going to go her way. I didn't leave in anger. I left the way I'd build a system, methodically, every failure point mapped out in advance. Day 2, called my attorney. No emotion, just facts and timeline. We set up a trust, completely legal, completely protected. 70% of our liquid assets moved into protected accounts. My pension and retirement funds locked down. The wedding fund stayed exactly where it was, because Natalie was still my daughter, and I wasn't going to make her pay for her mother's game. Left enough in the joint account to cover 3 months of household bills. I wasn't trying to destroy them financially. I was making absolutely sure they couldn't destroy me. Day 8. I made a call I'd been putting off for years. I had a son from my first marriage. His name was Adam. I was 26 when he was born, from a relationship that ended badly. By the time Linda and I got serious, Adam was already 18, living his own life, and the right moment to bring him up somehow never came. Then, it became something I'd buried so deep, it started to feel like a secret. Not a deliberate one, not a calculated one. Just one of those things you keep meaning to say and never do. He was 30 now. Worked as an operations coordinator at a manufacturing firm a few states away. Built himself a solid, self-made life that I was quietly proud of from a distance. I called him on day 8 and told him everything. He listened through the entire thing without interrupting once. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Dad, what do you need from me?" I almost lost it right there. First time in months somebody was asking what I needed instead of just taking from me. I explained the trust structure, told him I was naming him secondary beneficiary on everything. He agreed immediately, no hesitation at all. Linda and Natalie had 0 idea he existed, which meant they had absolutely no idea where anything was actually going. Day 9. Ready, packed 1 bag, transferred what I needed to a new account they had no access to, arranged a storage unit for the things that mattered, some photos of Natalie when she was little, a Tuesday or maybe Wednesday, doesn't matter, my dad's watch, 3 or 4 books I'd had since college. Everything else could stay. Alarm set for 4:30 a.m. Quietest part of the night. Cleanest exit window. I didn't sleep. I lay there next to Linda and felt nothing. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. At 4:30 I got up, got dressed quietly, did one last walkthrough, left my keys on the kitchen counter, left a half-full cup of water on the table. Small, deliberate things. Signals that said this was a choice, not a breakdown. Not the scene they'd been waiting for. At 4:47 in the morning, I walked out the front door and closed it quietly behind me. No note. There was nothing left to say. Wait. This is the host, not OP, real quick. I just watched a man engineer a 9-day controlled exit from his own marriage the same way he'd engineer backup systems for a commercial aircraft. He moved 70% of liquid assets into a protected trust. He surfaced a 30-year-old secret son as a secondary beneficiary. He mapped a 4:30 a.m. departure window and left with a half-full cup of water as his only goodbye. That's not leaving a marriage. That's Ocean's 11, except instead of a casino heist, it's a man protecting everything that was actually his from the people who were supposed to love him. Most guys in this situation blow the whole thing with one too many texts. This dude had a contingency plan for the contingency plan. Anyway, she's about to notice he's gone. I checked into a hotel near the airport under my own name. I wasn't hiding. I wanted to watch how long it took them to notice. The answer was 18 hours. Linda called once, left no voicemail. Natalie texted, "Where are you?" I didn't respond to either. They'd wanted me sitting in silence for 31 days. I figured they could handle a little of it themselves. Linda tried to reframe it publicly almost immediately. Posted vague stuff about supporting each other through difficult times, hinting at some kind of breakdown on my end. Natalie kept planning the wedding without missing a beat. Posted dress shopping photos, cake tasting photos, florist visits. Not a single mention of me anywhere. They rewrote the narrative fast and clean. I'd abandoned them. Chosen work over family. Cold, selfish, gone. Some people believed it. Most people who'd actually known me for more than a few years didn't. 2 months after I left, Linda's attorney contacted mine, demanding access to my pension and retirement accounts. That got shut down in about 15 minutes with the trust documentation. 3 months later, they tried to have me legally declared dead so Natalie could access my life insurance policy. I want you to sit with that for a second. That one failed faster than the pension attempt because I was very much alive and making sure people in my professional circle knew it. 6 months in, Linda called from Natalie's number, probably figuring I'd pick up for my daughter. I did pick up, because Natalie was still my kid, whatever else was true. Linda got on the line almost immediately. "We need to talk about your responsibilities," she said. Voice sharp, like I was a teenager who'd missed curfew. I said, "All my responsibilities are handled. Wedding fund is full. Bills are covered through the separation date. Anything else isn't my problem anymore." She started to argue. I hung up. That was the last conversation I had with Linda. Okay, pause. This is me, not OP. I need to run a quick timeline here because this woman's arc is genuinely something. She coordinated a month-long psychological experiment to manufacture a breakdown. Then she tried to raid his pension. Then, and I need you to actually process this, she filed to have him declared legally dead. The undertaker didn't want a divorce settlement. She wanted a death certificate. That's not a legal strategy. That's a Thanos move. She literally tried to snap him out of existence. And this is the woman who wrote, "He won't last a month," in a group chat, like she was setting a timer on a microwave. The coffee cup on the counter was the last thing she understood about this man. And she's been 3 steps behind ever since. Good news, it's about to get significantly worse for her. Meanwhile, I'd gone independent with my consulting. Turns out when you're not burning energy holding a marriage together that doesn't want you, there's a lot of bandwidth for actual work. I was making more than I'd ever made on salary. Rented a downtown apartment that actually felt like somewhere I wanted to come home to, which was a genuinely new feeling, and I didn't take it for granted. I found out through mutual friends, maybe a year after I left, that Natalie had called off the first engagement. They'd grown apart, apparently, which is the polite way of saying something broke. I didn't ask questions. A few months after that, she'd met someone new. His name was Ryan. He worked at an aerospace consulting firm a few states over. 2.5 years in, I was seeing someone. Claire, structural engineer. Which, yeah, apparently I have a type. She actually listened when I talked about my work instead of just tolerating it, which turned out to matter more than I'd realized. Adam and I had fallen into a real rhythm by then. Dinner once a month, actual conversations, the kind you look forward to instead of brace for. I had a life that felt chosen, picked on purpose. That's a thing you don't fully appreciate until you've had the other kind for a while. Then the invitation showed up. Heavy cardstock, elegant printing, Natalie's name and Ryan's at the top. Inside was a handwritten note in her handwriting. I recognized it immediately. Same blocky print she'd had since middle school. Dad, I need you to walk me down the aisle. Please, we need to talk before the wedding. Please call me. I stared at that note for a solid hour. Then I picked up the phone. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been sitting there holding it. She started apologizing before I could say anything. Just a rush of "I'm sorry and I was wrong and please let me explain." I told her to slow down. She did. And then she told me everything. Ryan's firm had partnered with my consulting company on 2 separate projects over the past year. He knew who I was before he ever met Natalie. Knew my reputation in the industry. When she told him her last name on their second date, he'd gone quiet and asked if her father was the aviation safety engineer who'd worked on a major recertification project he was familiar with. She said yes. He asked why she never mentioned me, and why her mom had been telling people I'd abandoned the family. Ryan, being an engineer, went and found out the actual story for himself. Talked to people who knew me. Then he sat Natalie down and showed her the real version of events, not Linda's version. Told her he wasn't willing to build a marriage on the foundation of someone else's destroyed relationship. That if she wanted to move forward with him, she needed to fix this first. Actually, back up. She told me one detail I keep coming back to. She said she'd spent months just sitting with the group chat. Going back over it, the timeline, all of it. The moment it really hit her that she'd actively helped erase her own father, and that she'd done it without ever once questioning whether it was the right thing. Said it was the hardest thing she'd ever had to face about herself. I believe that. I could hear it. She'd been trying to work up the nerve to call me for over a year. Didn't think I'd actually pick up. I let her finish everything. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Does your mother know you invited me?" Long pause. Then, quietly, "No. She thinks I'm walking alone. You're going to be a surprise." I smiled, slow, quiet, and told her I'd be there. Hold on. This is the host, not OP. I need everyone to fully clock Ryan's role in this, because it's something else. This man did a background investigation on his fiance's family drama, confronted her with documented evidence, and made reconciliation a contractual condition of the engagement. He essentially issued a corrective action report on her relationship with her own father and said, "Fix it or we don't take off." That is the most aerospace engineer move I have ever witnessed. And now, because of him, OP is about to walk through those doors as a full surprise, with a son nobody in that room knows exists, while Linda genuinely believes she's about to watch her daughter walk alone. She has no idea what kind of system has been building toward her. Popcorn. Ready. Now. The venue was a hotel in the city. One of those older buildings, marble floors, high ceilings, chandeliers that made every room feel like it had weight to it. I showed up 2 hours early through a side entrance Natalie had arranged and met her in a private room on the far end of the building. She was already in her dress. When she saw me, she started crying, careful about the makeup, but completely unable to keep it together anyway. We talked for almost an hour about how she'd slowly understood over the past year how much of her perception had been shaped by her mom, layer by layer over years, so gradual she'd never noticed it happening. About how Ryan had shown her what a real partnership looked like and how different it felt. About wanting to actually be someone different going forward, not just apologize and expect it to count. I told her I appreciated all of that. I also told her that showing up today didn't erase 3 years of being erased. That forgiveness was going to take time and would have to be earned in the day-to-day, not assumed because she'd said the right things. She nodded, said she understood, said she'd do whatever it took for however long it took. Ryan came in about 20 minutes before the ceremony. He shook my hand, looked me straight in the eye, and thanked me for coming. Then he mentioned, without making a production of it, that he'd been steering consulting contracts toward my firm for the past year. Not because of any of this, but because he'd followed my work independently and believed in it. He didn't need to tell me that. He told me anyway. That kind of thing matters. I liked him immediately. Direct, no performance, zero wasted words. Adam was already seated in the main hall. I'd gotten him a suit for the occasion. He looked good, better than me at his age, honestly, though I'd never say that to his face. I waited in the back hallway while the guests got settled. Heard the music begin, the officiant welcoming everyone. Then Natalie came and took my arm. We walked to the entrance. The doors opened. The entire room went quiet. Linda was in the front row. Her face moved through 3 separate emotions in about 2 seconds. Confused, then shocked, then something that looked like a hard crash. And then her eyes drifted sideways, past me, to Adam. A face she'd never seen. A man she had absolutely no file on. She looked back at me. Back at him. Back at me. I watched her put it together in real time. Every piece of it. We walked down that aisle in a silence that had a completely different weight than the silence she'd put me through 3 years ago. Every step felt like something. I handed Natalie to Ryan, shook his hand, and took my seat next to Adam. Linda kept turning around, trying to catch my eye. I looked straight ahead the entire time. Same energy she'd given me for 31 days. Right past her, like she wasn't there. It felt exactly as good as I thought it would. Definitely better, honestly. The ceremony was genuinely beautiful. Natalie looked happy in a real way. And somewhere in the middle of the vows, something in me eased. Not vindication exactly, more like a background process that had been running for 3 years finally stopped. Final update. The reception is where Linda completely fell apart. She cornered me near the catering table, her own mother right behind her. Before Linda could launch into whatever she'd prepared, her mom cut her off. "Linda, stop, just stop." Her mom's voice had the quiet weight of someone who'd been holding something back for a long time. I watched Linda's face crumble in real time. Her mom turned to me and apologized. Said she'd believed Linda's version of events for years. That a photo of me at an industry conference had started making her question the whole story, and that she was sorry for not reaching out sooner. Linda tried to interrupt. Her own mother told her to be quiet. "You've done enough damage already." Linda went to pieces right there. Started crying, making excuses, trying to get people to listen to her side of it, but nobody was listening anymore, because the story had been out long enough that the cracks were showing, and they'd finally broken open all the way. She'd spent 3 years performing the abandoned wife, and everyone in that room was quietly realizing they'd been watching a very well-rehearsed act. I didn't argue, didn't gloat, just stood there, steady, while it played out, then excused myself. Left the reception early with Adam and Claire, who I'd brought as my date. Linda watched Claire the way you look at something that answers a question you didn't want answered. We went to dinner downtown. Easy conversation, the kind you actually remember the next day. Nothing heavy, just good. Natalie texted late that night, "Thank you for coming. Can we get coffee sometime?" I said yes. She'd put in the work. She'd earned that. 6 months after the wedding, Natalie hit the conditions on the trust and got access to her inheritance. Used it to start her own business, building something independent, not an extension of her mom's orbit. We get coffee once a month now. It's a different relationship than before, smaller in some ways, but it's real. The old version wasn't. Linda tried to reach out a handful of times. I never responded. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're supposed to stay burned, so you remember exactly what the heat felt like and why you crossed to the other side. Claire and I got married last year. Small ceremony. Adam, Natalie, a few close friends. Nobody got erased. Nobody had to earn basic decency just to sit at the table. It was good. One thing still sitting there, unaddressed. Whether to tell Natalie the full detail of what I found on that laptop. She knows I found something. She doesn't know exactly what. I'll get there. Probably. But there's no rush anymore, and honestly, that feeling alone is worth more than I could have explained 3 years ago. Yo, last stop. This is me, the host. Let me run the final scoreboard real quick, because I think it deserves a moment. She opened this whole thing with, "Give him another week, he'll crack." He found the message, locked down his assets, surfaced a secret son, left at 4:47 a.m. with a water cup as his only goodbye, watched her try to raid his pension, watched her attempt to have him legally declared dead, then walked into her daughter's wedding with that same son seated 2 rows back while she sat in the front row thinking she had the whole thing figured out, and got cut off by her own mother in a full reception hall. That countdown she built, it ran out. She just never realized it was counting down to her. Look, this guy wasn't perfect. He kept a son off the books for 30 years and let things rot in his marriage longer than he probably should have before it all finally came to a head. But when he found that group chat and saw the message his wife had written about his breakdown timeline, he didn't explode, didn't beg, didn't fire off a confrontation text at midnight. He treated his own life like a failing system, identified every vulnerability, secured everything that actually mattered, and executed a clean exit. 3 years later, he walked back in with everything intact. That's not revenge. That's what happens when you finally stop fighting for people who've already decided you're not worth keeping. Drop your take in the comments. What's your first move the second you find that message? And if you're not subscribed, hit the button. You don't want to miss what's coming next.